Hi everyone, welcome to a short video tutorial about how to use watercolors to create a nice little seascape with a few boats. So I start by wetting the page with some clear water using a large mop brush, and then I'm going to use my 80-year-old pigments, which are found in an antique shop, still original, but have beautiful color vibrancy. I'm going to use these pigments to paint this little painting. So I start with the sky. I put in a Prussian blue, and that's a nice cool blue. And then I'm going to add a little bit of crimson into there, just to make it look like there's a sunset. Now, because we're painting a reflection, I'm going to take the same colors, just in reverse order, and paint the water with them. So I've added my crimson, and now I'm finishing off with some touches of Prussian blue. I'm making the sky reflections that are closer to me or closer to the bottom of the page a little bit darker, so actually I used some French ultramarine there. I've let everything dry completely, and now I'm using some Prussian blue with a little bit of crimson just to create a kind of cool brown. And this is what I'm going to use to paint the very first mountain range. So I'll start out with a distant mountain, keeping the values to pretty much a minimum, remembering that this mountain is going to be the furthest away from me. I then use the same outline of the mountain, just reflected in the lake. I make sure to dry everything completely with my heat gun. And now I'm going to put in a second mountain, which is going to be a little bit darker because it's going to be a little bit closer to the viewer. But the same principle applies. I'm adding a little bit of Prussian blue and warming it up with some crimson to create a kind of purplish brown color. And now I'm going to do the same reflection, just mirror image below this mountain. And dry everything off completely. And I'm getting ready to put my final third mountain into the mix. For this one I'm using a slightly warmer blue, which is the French ultramarine, and I mix in a little bit of viridian in there to create a warm purple color. So I put in my horizon line, and then I put in my final mountain or final hill. I make sure to use as few brush strokes as possible whilst I'm painting this hill, because I would like the wash to appear more uniform. And I'm reflecting this in final mountain into the lake below it. Once again, I dry everything off completely, and I'm now getting ready to paint some of these boats. So I'm mixing a slightly darker mixture of Prussian blue with a little bit of sienna to create a dark gray color, which I'm going to use to indicate some of these distant boats. Because the boats are a fair amount off in the distance, I'm not worried too much about their precise shape. The only thing I am concerned about is getting the dimensions right, and I'm going to use a little rigger brush to then put in a mast. And then I'm going to reflect that mast very quickly into the water below it. But now I'm moving on to boat number 2. The same mixture, now I'm just using a little bit more sienna. This is just to add variety in my colors. I already indicated the reflection of the mast, and now I'm putting in a slightly larger mast at the front. I'm trying to think of the perspective lines here, thinking that the second boat is a little bit closer to me, so the mast needs to be taller, and I'm adding a few more details in there to indicate that this boat is indeed a little bit closer than the first one I put in. For the third boat, the same thing applies. I add the general shape of the hull, and then I'm using Prussian blue to add some shadow shapes and reflections for this third boat. I'm making it a little bit darker still because it is closer to me than all the other ones. And I'm adding some more ripples in the water reflections below it. I'm mixing up a very dark, almost black mixture that I'm going to use for my mast, and this is again where my rigger comes in handy. And then I reflect the same mast together with all the rigging into the lake. And already at this stage we're seeing a couple of things. We're seeing that we're preserving the distance, so we're getting the distance effect, and we're also getting our reflections, and we're getting a sense of water being present in this painting. For my final boat, I'm using a burnt sienna just to indicate a more precise shape of the boat, but I will make it darker than all the other ones by dropping in some raw pigment consisting of Prussian blue and a little bit of sienna. I'm using a slightly bigger brush to draw the mast because it's thicker than all the previous masts, and I'm putting some reflections in. Now, because this is water, I'm not particularly worried about the mast being a little bit wonky. The water is moving, so the reflection itself is not very straight. Although the day itself, I wanted to capture kind of a stillness of the day. So here I thought it would be fun to add a little sail to this, to that further ship. And here I'm just going to use a slightly darker mixture to darken up my mast and indicate a little bit of texture. Generally speaking, whenever a subject is darker, the darker nature brings it forward. So I know that this boat that I'm going to be painting now is going to have more detail, more visible detail, so we'll see some of these details around its hull, around its sides, and it's also going to be darker in value compared to all the other boats. I'm still holding my rigger fairly far up on its handle just to give me a sense of freedom when I paint these lines. I don't really want these lines to be architectural. I want them to be a little bit more impressionistic. I'm just darkening the reflection of the boat in the water. I'm using my rigger to put some darker values where the hull of the boat is touching the water. And usually when you observe a boat on the water, this is the darkest part. This is where there is no light, and also it creates a sense of contact between the boat and the water that you're painting, so that it doesn't feel like it's floating in midair. Now, I wanted to create something, I'm not sure whether it's going to work or not, but I just wanted to create an accent. So I use a very bright red to essentially paint a little boy, which the boat in the foreground is going to be tethered to. So it's just for curiosity's sake rather than anything in particular. So I drop in a little bit of Prussian blue to to create some shadow sides, and I'm going to use my rigger just to paint a few ripples around this buoy, just to give a sense of it sitting in water. And then I'm connecting the buoy to the boat in the foreground. Now I think the buoy is a little bit larger than I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I think the idea is a fairly interesting one, but I wish I painted it in slightly smaller fashion. And then for the final thing, I'm going to just put down a glaze, and I'm mixing a Viridian with some French ultramarine, and that creates a really lovely transparent glazing color. And this is so that I can indicate the ripples of this lake. So I wanted the lake to be fairly calm, but even in this calmness, the water is not still. There are still shadows in the water, and this is what I wanted to capture here. And this is it. I think I'm relatively happy with how this painting turned out. I think I should have kept the mountains probably on the bluer side rather than introducing any of that additional Viridian in there. But generally speaking, this was a fun little exercise, and I hope you found it useful as well. Take care.